Hello, everyone watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, all of our platforms. Happy Monday. This is another edition of Adweek Together. My name is Ko Im. I'm the community editor and podcast co-host here at Adweek, and we are going to talk about the future of audio. But first, we want to remind you about our special subscription offer. You can go to adweek.com/offer and get an Adweek Pro subscription and gain unlimited access to our essential premium content and, of course, all of our resources. We hope you enjoy them. Before we get started, we want to show you a little snippet of what we are going to hear and talk about.
If you're listening to us and you can be swept away for a little while, that's our ultimate goal.
Here we are, and here are new music on Spotify's New Music Friday playlist now.
Buenas noches, Mexico!
Music is supposed to move you, bitch! Are you moved?
Duh.
Hey y'all, I heard some of my fan club was hanging out online today. Yo!
The podcast is moving to Spotify, the largest audio platform in the world.
Spotify has signed an exclusive podcasting deal with former U.S. President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle.
We believe storytellers is to tell the most crafted, immersive stories that we can. Audio has this very special power to take you inside of an experience in a way that can really bring you there. We're built around bringing that power to the world.
So fun, a lot going on. We welcome Julie Clark, Global Head of Ad Revenue Innovation at Spotify. Good morning, Julie. This has been a big year for you all.
Good morning, Ko. It's so nice to be chatting with you. Yeah, it's been a huge year. It's been pretty massive on a lot of different fronts.
We saw the little snippet of Michelle Obama in there. What was the big news that you're gearing up for the end of the month?
So we're so excited. We partnered, we announced our partnership with Higher Ground last year. And the first show that is going to be premiering is the Michelle Obama podcast. That will be premiering on July 29th. It will be exclusive on Spotify. And we're just so excited to be able to bring this sort of content to all of our users on the free and the premium side of the business.
Yeah, let's talk about content during quarantine, right? I think a lot of people were starting to create podcasts. They were at home. It was accessible. They could, take advantage of in-app ad offers. Were people listening to podcasts? What was kind of the trends that you were seeing in-house?
What we've been seeing in-house is that, listening behaviors have largely, remained the same, but where people are listening is very different and how they're listening. The content that people are listening to really seems to be veering more towards comfort and education during this time. So we're seeing a lot more listening on, consoles during gaming. We're also seeing a lot of communal listening during quarantine time, periods where people are listening to the same music together. So, from a podcast perspective, we've really seen listeners lean into, funny content that is comforting, and really engaging with hosts as well. So, the hosts that they know and they love, like Jamel Hill and Bill Simmons, those are the ones that are, gaining a ton of listenership just with that common voice and, being able to bring comfort during this time.
I know you have to listen to a lot of podcasts and content and music probably for your job, but do you have a favorite or a couple of favorites?
I have a bunch of different favorites. One of the most recently I've loved is Winds of Change, which is, it was an investigative reporting into, did the CIA help to develop one of the most popular songs ever? And, I will say you have to listen. It's absolutely fantastic. But I personally am drawn to a lot of news. I listen to a lot of news content. I listen to content around our industry. I also love the show Happiness Lab, which is around the science of happiness. And I think that that's something, especially during this time, it is important to be thinking about, those different aspects.
Yeah, people are definitely getting into kind of more niche subjects. People
Yes.
want explainers. I can't help it. I have to promote all of our 5 Adweek podcasts.
Which are excellent, yes.
They have very specific audiences, and we have different hosts for them.
Yes.
So from a creator standpoint, what can we do, right, in terms of working with brands and sponsors? What can other creators kind of take away from what Spotify is doing right now?
Well, I mean, I think that you make a great point is that, each podcast has a different host, and hosting a podcast is actually, being a creator isn't just necessarily, setting up a microphone and starting to talk. It's really about, the content overall. And I think that that's something with Spotify is like, you'll see that we are bringing on so many different and diverse creators into the ecosystem, from DC Comics to Joe Rogan and Jordan Peele and Lele Pons, in combination with Michelle Obama, in the Ringer content. It's just bringing those diverse voices. And I think that, from a brand perspective, it's really about that intimacy that you have with podcast, and podcast advertising is very different in that way, whether it's a host read or voice talent within that content. It is intimate. It's very engaging. So we're focusing not only on, bringing that, marquee content to our platform, but also the audio innovation that goes into the ad tech as well. So, our streaming ad insertion was announced earlier this year. It's, continuing to grow in the size of the volume of content that we have enabled with our SAI tech. So, we're really trying to build and continue that intimate quality of brands connecting with podcast advertising, but at the same time bringing digital tech to the forefront.
Right. You bring up the point about, hosts being able to personalize and really engage with the listeners and the brand. And that's something I think that has been unique from even before the term podcast came up, right? In terms of radio hosts and personalities. So let's talk about, some of that innovation in terms of sponsorship. I think our producer has a demo, and I'd love for you to explain what we're going to be seeing.
Absolutely. So like I had said, we started with our streaming ad insertion technology, and now what we're doing is expanding that even further in improving the ad experience overall. Because when, users are, or consumers are listening to a podcast, they might not necessarily be taking an action at that moment. But what we're going to do is we're resurfacing the ads within the app environment so that listeners can redeem the offer in a time that's right for them. Currently, we're testing this in the US and in Germany with HelloFresh and Harry's.
Yeah, I also know that you guys are expanding globally, and you are the global head of revenue. So how big is Spotify getting in other countries, and what are kind of the trends that we're seeing overseas?
So what I would say is, like, from a podcast specific perspective, we're seeing listenership grow across the board. What we're seeing is, over 70%, of, audio, or over 70% of US consumers are consuming some sort of audio, at this point in time. We're seeing those same sort of trends across the globe as well. And Germany is a big focus for us from a global perspective, as that has a ton of, marquee podcasts within that market, all within the Spotify platform, that we're looking to continue that global footprint. And then also, within the UK, we have, custom owned and original content within the UK, Latin America, Australia. So we're really expanding our footprint across, the 79 markets that we're already in, and have a ton of room to be able to grow.
Yeah, I want to go back to the offer, right? The example we saw Harry's. I suppose podcasting is built for multitasking. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that podcasting by its very nature is engaging. It's interactive. You're listening to the ad. We know that the research shows that whether it's a host read or a voice talent read, that there is a resonance within that environment. And bringing that in-app offers is satisfying, both the element of being able to have that continual listening experience, while then bringing back the ad in more of a direct response environment. So it's really bridging those gaps.
Yeah, I remember the days of, radio, and it still happens now, but
Yeah.
it's like you have the next 5 minutes to call in and get this and potentially win. And versus now it's like, oh, you can save this, open it, and use it later at a time that's convenient for you after you're cooking and listening to us, after you're walking and listening to us, right?
Absolutely. And I think that that's the thing. I mean, and it's true of Spotify across the board, whether it's music or it's podcasts, it's really about the user experience. And it's making sure that, we're not interrupting that experience that you have within the music and the podcast environment in a way that is detrimental to the content that you're consuming at that time. So in-app offers is another way for us to be able to expand that and to be able to increase the likelihood and engagement for our brand partners as well.
Yep. Are you seeing a certain category where brands that want to kind of be in the podcast atmosphere?
So, podcasting is very interesting. It has been, historically very D2C and DR heavy, historically, and that's still true. I mean, I think that they were early adopters to be able to understand how to get the medium to be able to work. And I think that, we're working with a lot of those marketers still and learning from them. And they're, and as we're going on this SAI and in-app offer journey, working closely with them, we are seeing a ton more brands come in from like a pure branding perspective and engaging in a real way within podcasts, not just with testing budgets, but really, moving the needle across the board. And I think that that's, we're not seeing share shift. It's really about how do we grow the overall impact and share of ear for a marketer across all of Spotify.
I don't know if it's just Spotify in general, but is there more testing for podcast ads?
There's a ton of, I would say yes, because we're launching so many new products, we are testing, a ton with different marketers. I would say that brands in general will enter under, test parameters. And I think that SAI has been a really great way to be able to move the needle on that front, because now there's an ability to give audience data. People understand if their ads are actually being listened to, whereas in the pure download environment, you don't necessarily always know if your podcast ad had been heard. So I think that it gives a little bit more, meat on the bones of being able to get into that test.
Right. Sarah has a question from our LinkedIn audience. For what kind of products or services are podcasts suitable for advertising?
I mean, we're seeing everything from CPG to automotive to D2C. So I would say because the content, we have over 1 million different podcasts on Spotify. We have, over 350 owned and exclusive podcasts. There's so much content. I would say podcasts, you can find the right content for any brand. And it's really about how do you, target that audience? How do you make sure that you're making that connection?
Yeah. I want to take a step back. There has been a lot going on around the world, and then a lot of developments at Spotify. How are you doing, and how are you leading your team and the way that you think about innovation and revenue?
That is a really great question. And thank you for that. I'm doing great. Not always, like during the pandemic, there's definitely ups and downs of, I definitely have been, I'm more of a person that's built for work from home, probably more than most. But even for me, I think about that with my team. It's like, if this is a comfortable place for me to be, and I still get uncomfortable with being work from home all the time, I can't imagine for those that are, really not enjoying this. So I think that it's just, I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to really understand what, my team is going through, and then applying that to how we show up for work every day for each other and then for our brand partners as well. So I think that from the innovation standpoint, the thing that I've welcomed is it forces you to think differently. I think that that's something that I've always been mindful of is waking up and thinking, these are the things I have to do, but what can I do differently today? I think that is becoming more natural. And I think that it's just going to breed even more success as we, fail fast and keep moving forward quickly.
Yeah, I was also thinking, it's kind of obvious, but has quarantine made us better listeners? I wonder if, the ideas and the innovation and the creativity that comes specifically with, audio and revenue, is that coming more from a consumer-led standpoint, meaning, listening to consumer needs and really honing in on the customer experience, especially now when, we're so adapt so much. There's so much adaptation and
Right.
evolution in behavior and sensitivity to our environments.
I hope so. I hope that it makes us, just better listeners and better humans, within that environment. I think that one of the trappings of it is that, work can become very transactional. We have this quick little meeting and then we move along. I think that the more that we can, be mindful of those engagements and be better listeners, I hope that you're right. I think that that is definitely something that is, could be a really powerful output from this time.
Great. Where are you focusing your energies? Is it especially the launch coming up on July 29th, and then more innovation, more testing? What's on kind of your calendar?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a podcast focus, and also, part of what I've just been thinking about is, the additive environment of podcasts and music. Podcasts and music together, we see increases engagement and listenership. Millennials and Gen Z are spending 18 hours a week streaming audio. So, that's an incredible amount of time. And how can we bring those two together in the platform from a brand perspective and a partnership perspective to be able to continue to, grow revenue for us, but also maximize, brand exposure in the right way with, all of the data and insights that we can bring to them. So that's definitely a huge focus. And yes, I am very excited for July 29th with the Michelle Obama podcast launching soon.
I'm sure we'll all have it in our
calendars. It's gonna be good. You gotta listen.
I want to ask you kind of a last question. What is the future of audio, Julie? Is it going to be, if you had a crystal ball of sorts, maybe even an amalgamation of music and podcast? What is the future of audio from where you sit?
The future of audio is massive. We see it growing continually now, and I don't think that there's an end in sight. I think the future of audio is having a brand voice, and I think that it's really important right now that brands are thinking about, how they're showing up for consumers, how they're showing up for listeners, and what that brand voice is, and how you invest in that. I think that with video fatigue being a reality, that audio is an amazing break, and there's so much opportunity for creativity within this space that the future is very, very bright.
Well, Julie Clark from Spotify, thank you so much for sharing your voice, your hopes, and your insights with us today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Appreciate your time.
Of course. And be sure to tune in to next week's edition of Adweek Together, our live series on the future of everything. And also, please sign up for a special subscription, adweek.com/offer, so you can unlock our unlimited content, essential resources, and of course, deeper conversations. My name is Ko Im. I hope you have a great week and see you soon.